And you are now live.
Thank you, Ayse. So welcome everyone to this evening's FBS chat. Amazed that we've got Matthew. I know he's an extremely busy man. Thank you so much, Matthew, for agreeing to join us.
It's my pleasure.
And our godfather, mentor, all-round good egg, as we say in the UK, Gil from Ohio, and Matthew's in Chicago. So thank you, Gil, again for joining us.
Love to be here.
Yeah. So Matthew, I'm always fascinated how people came across a solution-oriented, focused approach, and what resonated with them, what made people say, you know, this is how I want to work.
Well, Gil will be the first to attest that I am a pathological optimist by nature and a very overly enthusiastic person. And I think it really fits with my personality, the person of who I am. I live the solution-focused approach lifestyle. But my original training was in structural strategic family therapy, actually. One of the best trainings I ever had was a week-long training, live supervision with Salvador Minuchin. And I'll never forget when he called me on the phone with the family. Matt, you're too central. You're too central. You have lead pants on. You know? And I was so like, you know, in front of all these other trainees, you know, I was like, God, this is really humiliating, everything. And at the coffee break, he and I went for a long walk. And, you know, when he puts the club down, you know, he's just a gentle, big-hearted, great guy. And he's funny, too. And we went for a walk, and he said, Matt, you have to dance with the family. You have to enjoy yourself. Break loose, you know. And I found that so liberating. And from that point on, I started to break loose more and fall out of my chair out of amazement when people tell me big steps they've taken, and giving high fives and walking out of the session and they don't even know if I'm going to come back again. You know, and so I found that really liberating, and I kind of infused that into my kind of way of working as a therapist. But I think one of the things that I struggled with, and I trained with Jay Haley and Chloe Madonis and John Weekland as well, who was a consultant at one of the clinics that I worked at with Michelle Weiner Davis. And that was my introduction to solution-focused therapy. And once I got a taste of it and caught the solution-focused people, there was stopping me. I didn't like the idea of this top-down power play type of therapy with structural and strategic, where you're the sort of privileged expert and you will come up with a perfect reframe and you'll move people around in the room like a traffic police officer, you know. It just wasn't me. And once I saw the positive results of the solution-focused approach, that people are already changing well before we see them for the first time, and why not ask about their expertise, you know? It just makes their job so much easier. And that therapy is collaborative, and the client's goals drive the treatment. And everybody, even the most so-called dysfunctional, you know, people labeled with, you know, borderline personality or psychotic or whatever, there are times where there are problems. So let's find out what's working and build off of that. And so it really made a lot of sense to me. And we had our supervision of supervision up in Milwaukee at the Brief Therapy Center. And this was back in 1986. Eve Lipchick, who I believe is one of the true mothers of many of the solution-focused questions. She was really the one that came up with a lot of those questions. And Steve also was a consultant at the clinic that I worked at with Michelle Weiner Davis. Michelle did live supervision with me, supervision for a year, and I learned so much. And then I was supervising an adolescent substance abuse program using the solution-focused model as a supervisory framework. And I was getting really good results with that as well. So we were getting supervision of supervision with Steve and Insu and Eve Lipchick, and it was really great. And I was really learning this model. But then I had a family that had 16 treatment experiences And we're not responding as well as other families to a more pure solution-focused approach. And then I stumbled upon the work of Michael White and David Epstein, and I love this whole externalization of the problem idea. I think it's a nice therapeutic option that we have, especially with clients that have had lots of treatment and maybe experienced lots of losses and trauma, and their main presenting problem sort of has a life of its own. And it may even be like a metaphor for the family. So I had this girl, 16 going on 36, who 16 treatment experiences, some at family therapy institutes and residential treatment centers. And she was involved with gangs. She was hitchhiking across America, involved with motorcycle guys who were rough and tough. She was prostituting, doing multiple drugs, very violent. And she had to be, because a lot of the mom's boyfriends, she was a heroin addict mom, and alcoholic. And I'm sure that these guys took advantage of her. And so running away was about survival, a pathological thing. And so she was really resilient. And knowing that she had all the power in the family and was in charge of the family mood, I decided to, in the very first session, to meet with her alone before I met with the parents alone. And I asked her, you've seen 16 therapists before me. What happened with these other therapists that was a real drag for you or you didn't like, so I don't make the same mistakes? And then she just guided me in the direction of what I need to do differently to empower her in a way that she wouldn't run away and she would stay and work out the family problems in their relationships and stuff like that. And it was so helpful. And it also taught me a valuable lesson when we work with adolescents, especially very powerful professional client adolescents. We really have to be mindful and respectful of that power, and meet with them first before you meet with the parents. Otherwise, they're thinking when you're meeting with the parents, they're probably scheming. They're probably going to put me in the hospital or something like that, right? And so she was great. She had all these strengths. She had a wonderful singing voice. I had to work, unfortunately, on my birthday, and she brought in a big heart-shaped balloon, and she gave me a card, and I was so touched by this. I've saved it, actually, and it said, "Thank you for being a family saver." And I saw them 8 times with longer time intervals between 2 through 8. And she ended up at a drama school, which was so fitting for her. And I got Christmas cards like for years after. So this case in particular was really important in my development as a therapist, as a family therapist, that we have to be flexible and we need to be integrative and find that fit in terms of what combination strategies or approaches might work best to help this family, and get their feedback every session about how we're doing together. Are there any adjustments you need me to make? And I'm constantly shifting gears until I find fit with each family member, and strengthen my alliance with them. But so that's how I got into the narrative piece. And then also I trained with Harry Galician and Harlene Anderson, brought them to Chicago for a weekend. And we presented 2 families a day, and they did live consultations with us. And I learned so much from that experience about honoring the client's story, particularly clients that have had lots of treatment, and not be a narrative editor, and be patient and put them in the expert position about what hasn't worked with former therapists, treatment programs, what you need to do differently, And also the importance of collaborating with all the key resource people in the client's social ecology. So one of the more recent ideas that I've developed with, I use a lot in my work with very complex adolescent situations where there's multiple problems and multiple helping professionals involved, is what I call solution-determined collaborative teams, where I invite the family to tell me, who do I need to collaborate with? What involved helping professionals and what key resource people from their social network, an aunt, uncle, grandparents, cousins, people in the community that they look up to or have supported them. And we meet together in a circle format so everyone can see one another, and maybe for sometimes an hour and a half. And we talk about, the family has the lead voice in terms of what they need from all these people that can help them in the best way possible. And together we co-construct solutions. We come up with ideas together, and then the family can pick and choose what they'd like to experiment with over, the week or two that between our meetings. And so sometimes I'll work this way along with individual family therapy, or sometimes it's just enough to meet with everybody. And maybe have, 4 or 5 meetings or whatever over 6 months. And I think this not only makes therapy briefer when you have all this brain power and creativity around the circle, but you're covering all the bases. Every context in which this adolescent and the family interfaces with is represented there. So you have people working for you between sessions, like multiple co-therapists essentially. And it makes our jobs easier and it prevents burnout. So that's a new idea that I've been playing around with lately.
Wow. I don't know where to start. That was fantastic. Thank you. It felt like that it was the right fit for you. And I think when I first learned the approach, it felt right. It felt like the right way for me to do. So I wasn't coming across as forced, because I knew it was in my heart. I knew this was okay. So in terms of when you, like you were saying, this family with 16 different therapists and all that, and you weren't scared to look at other ways of, rather than getting the family to fit in a model, it was like, what model might best fit that family? Is that kind of?
Yeah, and you read the feedback. If you're getting head nods and some sort of acknowledgement that idea seemed to resonate with them, then you pursue it. If people are looking at you like you're strange, like sometimes when you externalize the problem, people look at you like, what? And so then you got to shift out of that and try something else. But, and I just wanted to add that, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this too. You can change the main problem maintaining patterns that are like the problem life support system for the kids' difficulties, and even change the parents' beliefs or viewing of how they see their kid. And yet the adolescent is still symptomatic. They're still having a lot of internal challenges, basically. So I've built into my work because typically I work with the whole family, see the parents, see the kid, or if the kid is running the show, I see the kid, then the parents. I think it's important is to attend to all that internal storm material. So I've incorporated mindfulness meditation into my work. I've had training in art therapy, and some of the kids that we work with really have a hard time articulating what they're thinking and feeling. But on the paper or in the sculpture or in the photography, they can express what's going on inside in a really powerful way. And that gives us that sort of lift the drawbridge so we can enter that world and help them relieve some of that distress. So I think that's really important. So if I have a kid that's a visual spatial type of kid, we're going to do art, photography, sculpture, stuff like that. If we have a kid who's strong in linguistic intelligence, we're going to use expressive writing kinds of experiments. If you have a kid that is strong in bodily kinesthetic intelligence, that is, they use their bodies to express themselves in sports or dancing, we're going to build those metaphors. Or like soccer, we're going to find out from the parents, what steps does this kid need to take over the next week to score goals with them? And they can come up with the scoring criterion of what would warrant, 3 points, 2 points, 1 point, etc. And because that's meaningful to the young person, they're going to get on board with it. They're going to work with us to try and implement the ritual.
Wow. And
Hold on, it's Gil's turn. What are you doing?
sorry, yeah, go on, Gil. Sorry.
No, sorry.
Yeah, just jump in, Gil.
Yeah. Matthew, I think you have to say that not just in the U.S., but also in the U.K. and elsewhere in the world, the mental health system is driven by the medical model. And it's sort of its accompanying dominance by CBT. And so I'm just wondering how do you get your work, which is strength-based, very multi-system oriented, how do you get your work to kind of fit in with that?
Well, I usually work very closely with psychiatrists because I enter my collaborations with involved helping professionals with an open mind and belief that they've been trained in a particular way, so they'll be looking for particular things. But what I have found, especially with psychiatrists, is to see if they're willing in their busy schedules to join me in a family session and watch how I work, and then for us to dialogue after the session about what my thinking was in action. And I've had some psychiatrists after doing that have asked for training, or can I sit in more sessions with you and stuff like that. So I think the lack of exposure and the type of training that they experience. Now, I think that's changing in medical schools. They're having like family medicine now, where they're involving, as part of their training, they're getting training in family therapy. But I don't think they get enough training experience. They get the educational piece, but practice experience. Yeah. So I want to give them that opportunity. And so I don't get into these power struggles and I'm right and you're wrong. But instead I'm curious, like if the doctor thinks this young lady that you're working with who's 16 is borderline personality disorder, I'm going to be curious with that psychiatrist and ask, help me understand how you came to that understanding of what's going on with Lisa. It's hard to get defensive with someone who's curious.
Yeah.
And then formulate questions, because sometimes, and I'm sure all of you will admit to this, that you're in a collaborative meeting with some highly pessimistic, pathology-minded helping professionals, and inside you're, wait a second, my kid is doing much better, they're going to school now and they're taking responsibility. Give this kid a fair shake. But if you get defensive in a collaborative meeting, you're going to shut down the conversation. And these people are going to think you think you know everything. And so why should I attend these meetings? We really have to work for a both and kind of collaborative relationship where I do want to try and understand how you see this particular girl as being a borderline personality disorder. And ask them about what kinds of things have they tried that seem to work with this type of problem, and what he or she would need to see happen that would maybe offer them another possibility about what's going on with this kid, so that I have some guidance about what I should maybe focus on a little more. So I really try and be very respectful, and I see all these involved helping professionals as potential allies, just like the clients that I work with that also possess strengths and resourcefulness and creativity, and they can help me help the clients.
Mm-hmm. Something I'm always curious about, and with someone who's been in the field a while like yourself, and I always try to take every opportunity to ask questions of someone like that, is, so you were talking earlier about how you got into it and being overall strength-based, solution-focused and strength-based. Narrative is strength-based. So we say a little more about what attracted you to that, and why do you stay with that approach, given that there's such a dominance in the field writ large, CBT?
Well, I would like to say that I've picked up a lot of CBT casualty cases. For me, it's too linear and too narrow, and by nature, I think I'm a systemic ecological thinker, and I think that we need to look at the big picture. I mean, so I liken myself to sort of like a zoom lens kind of camera, where you kind of can zoom in and look at, specific behaviors or those solution maintaining patterns that we want to harness and use more, and then zoom out to look at the interactions between the adolescent and the parents, the adolescent and helping professionals in the community, their peer group. And I oftentimes will bring in the peers to join us in family sessions, get written consent for that. And because maybe they've had similar difficulties with their parents and came up with some really creative solutions, and maybe we can learn from them. So I'm always, I guess, I'm open to everyone's perspective, and I try and avoid at all costs privileging my position on things.
And how do you work things out with funders and insurance companies?
Well, I'm on a couple of major insurance company panels, I guess you can call. And so most of the work that I do is paid by their insurance. I do have some fee-for-service clients, but I've charge, I work mostly with families, but when I do have collaborative meetings up at the school with the parents and the adolescent present, the way that I like to help the clients out so they don't have to pay out of pocket for my time is that we'll bill it as a family session, basically. And that has not blown up for me or been an issue, I guess you could say.
Cool. So the insurance companies will reimburse you for your work, the type of work you do.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
In fact, I think they like the fact that I'm very goal focused and efficient, so I'm not exhausting clients' benefits.
Right. Yeah. They like that. They do like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really interested in the sense, because obviously you've looked at different ways of different interventions, different things that work or may not. When you were with that client, and I think sometimes we could say, I think you might benefit from art therapy. I know this guy down the road, or you might benefit from mindfulness. I know this guy down the road. But you kind of just want to learn it all. Well,
think of it this way. I think as professional therapists, I think we should educate ourselves not only about a wide range of therapeutic approaches, but also other fields. I've gone to business workshops. I've gone to workshops on art. I've taken cooking classes, I will bring in ideas from anywhere And I think the more we open ourselves up, that everything is grist for the mill here. Everything could offer us something to make our work more interesting, and where we can sort of put things together to inspire us and come up with new ideas. You all know that I'm very passionate about cooking because I like to showcase some of the things that I've made. But oftentimes I'll be thinking about, if the session seems kind of dull or humdrum, how can I spice it up? So I'll throw some hot chili flakes in there, or some garlic, and I'm thinking like that. Or I'm thinking about Miles Davis, like, what would he do in this situation? Like, how would he improvise? What would he do that would be surprising?
Yeah.
I think that fits perfectly to Marika's question. What is your best SF dinner? Which ingredients are in there?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm a big fan of garlic, so garlic will definitely be in there. Although I discovered this black garlic, which apparently does not have like an aftertaste, and you can't smell the person, It's not as bad as the real deal garlic. So I've been cooking a lot with this black garlic, and I don't know, I like celestial experiences. So I make a lot of curries and, with all kinds of spices, and experiment with, kind of unique combinations of things, like sometimes fuse different cuisines together and stuff like that. But it's hard to just say like there's one solution focused dinner. There's many. But, I think that if I were to do it all over again, I would have gone to chef school, because ever since I was a kid, I was cooking in the kitchen with my mom and really got into it. And I do take cooking classes, and I think it's fun, and it's a nice way to kind of be artistic in the kitchen. Yeah.
Matthew, I know in one of your books, I was just thumbing through it. I couldn't find it. You had a little chapter towards the end of the book on improvisation in therapy. So It sounds like you do that in your cooking as well.
I do. No, I'm one of these guys that gets bored really easily, and I think that's why I, became more of a, I want to say, integrative, flexible, solution-focused therapist. Because there was just something too formulaic with client does this, then you do that. It's just sort of robotic. And again, even Milton H. Erickson said we should never try and fit our clients into the box of a model, even if, it's more about them than us, But I've seen this a lot, and maybe Gil would attest to this too, because you've done training as well, that once people catch that solution-focused fever, they get very rigid with it, and, like this is a panacea for everything. And they do try and fit the client into the box, and they don't cover the back door, like asking a question like, what would you have to do to go backwards at this point? Or, I'm sending you on a vacation from counseling, I asked you when you want to come back, in 2 or 3 weeks, and you said 3 weeks. And just to ask the question, let's say over the next 3 weeks, things seem to be going really well, and then something stressful happens and derails the two of you, and you and your mom start locking horns again. What might you think might trigger that we should be on the lookout for, and what steps should you take to quickly diffuse it and get back on track? So I think we need to cover the back door, and I think this is a big problem. In fact, if we look at some of the major crises and catastrophes that have happened in the world, like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, where with nuclear radiation leakage, people knew about it, but they didn't communicate to the powers of be. And even if they did, the powers that be didn't do anything about it. That's what happened with 9/11. There were FBI agents that knew that these operatives came down from Canada and called Washington. Washington did nothing about it. And then we had 9/11. So I've taken that into my work with clients. I make sure I cover the back door and that they're prepared to deal with some kind of flip or crisis that might come up, which might even be outside of the target goal area, you know, like father just discovered he has cancer and everybody's worried about that. And the mom has kind of withdrawn from the daughter because she's attending to the dad, and the daughter's having a hard time coping. But you got to take all that into consideration. If that's going to be called problem talk, so be it. But I think it's respectful and ethical to make yourself aware of what's going on in the life of our clients that we really need to cover for. That's why I like doing worst-case scenario planning. You know, once people change, let's look at what might potentially happen, 3 or 4 scenarios, the steps that the adolescent will take to stay on track and not cave into a slip, mom and dad, key resource people from the social network. I actually have a form where they fill that out. And that's the nice thing about working with all the key resource people in the social ecology, because we'll have people working for us to help our clients stay on track and consolidate their gains.
I like it. Go on, Joe.
Yeah. And I think, do you phrase it as bumps in the road, Matthew? Is that if there's a bump in the road, how will you manage that? Is that the phrase you...
I think that people where this becomes a religion, I don't know, Gil, did I tell you about the Solution Narrative Conference in Milwaukee?
I'm not sure.
And Michael White went head to head.
I've vaguely, I'd heard that from somebody else as well, a little bit about that. But yeah, go ahead, tell the group about it.
It was a 3-day conference, and everyone was so excited because we're going to have these 2 gurus comparing, supposedly, this was the description on the conference brochure, comparing and contrasting their models. And what ended up happening was they were both kind of privileging each other's approach. And then some weird things happened where Michael White would show a video where he looked very solution focused, very narrative in his session with the client. And then at the breaks, people were getting into it in during breaks, like the narrative religious people, the zealots, were getting into it with the religious solution focused people. It's like isomorphic of what was going on with our 2 speakers, And I don't like that. I actually left early from that conference because I thought it was silly. It was like we were back in high school, And I think there are people that get too rigid with their approach where, they don't open themselves up to any other possible ideas. Now, believe me, I've had these conversations with Harvey Ratner and Chris Iveson. And I take my hat off to them. I think they do incredible work within the box, within the constraint of the solution-focused model. They've come up with some very creative ideas, and I think they do incredible work. But I think sometimes they see me as creating too much complexity for myself. That just rely on the main question, and that'll be this utopian outcome, And it just doesn't work that way. Not the clients I work with, where they're coming in with multiple serious self-destructive behaviors. We have one or both parents who have alcohol and drug problems, eating disorders, another kid who, is abusing cocaine, and they're all coming to see me, It just, you can't just keep it simple. You have to allow your model to evolve, and you can always come back to your solution-focused approach once we stabilize some of these things using a wide range of approaches, I guess. And then we can come back to solution-focused for goal setting, consolidating gains, using the future more. But I think we just have to be more flexible and open-minded. And I don't think it's about creating complexity for myself and the client. I think it's about being a flexible therapist and being ethically responsible to shift gears and incorporate other ideas so that we can best meet the needs of our clients.
Well, Jeff Chang just said, Matthew and I are among the SF heretics.
Yes, Jeff Chang. High five.
He also said that conference was a barn burner.
Yeah, that's right. Jeff was there.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Joe, do you want to
Jeff and I go way back. I did a 2-day workshop, I'm going to say in the late 80s, maybe, in Calgary, at a residential treatment center place where they work with adolescent substance users. And Jeff and I hit it off back then, and we've stayed in touch, over the years and everything. It's been great.
So, and I think what you were saying earlier is really important, and something maybe I don't know enough of is that end of session feedback every time to find out what's been helpful, or maybe what not been helpful, and what we need to change. And I was just wondering, because you sound like I will put all these different things in my tool bag, whatever I think may work for this client. When I mean, and none of us stop learning. So are there still new things that you're looking forward to trying, or will that just come up when the next client guides you that way?
Well, for me, it's what direction. The old Erickson story about how he was walking and a horse trotted by and decided to hop on the back of the horse, and the horse ended up bringing him back to the farmer's farm, and the farmer said, well, how did you know where my farm was? And he said, the horse showed me. It's so true. I mean, our clients will inevitably lead the way. We just have to sometimes just shut up and let them tell us what they need that will make them truly satisfied with our work together. And and again, I do believe that all clients have the strengths and resources to change, no matter how many treatment experiences they've had or how severe the labels are. There's always the possibility of change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go on, Gil.
I was going to say, Matthew, I know you've written quite a bit on working with self-harming clients, and of course, the research shows that very high percentage of those clients also have trauma history. So, speak a little bit about how you work with clients like that.
Well, I've been working with this population for maybe 29, 30 years, and I'd like to say that I've had a small percentage of clients that experience sexual or physical abuse. If anything that has been traumatic, it's been, I would say, emotional invalidation, that for whatever reason, one or both parents have just not been in tune with them when they're experiencing emotional distress and rapidly soothing or comforting them. So therefore, they have to take matters into their own hands. And not only do they do this underground because, first of all, it really works for them. It's like taking 10 aspirin, It quickly numbs out bad thoughts and feelings. And for the most part, the largest percentage of these young people are doing it as a coping strategy. So there's actually a logic to this. It's not this sort of pathological self-mutilation thing. It's an attempted solution to cope with some very real stressors in their lives. And unfortunately, when they can't count on their parents to comfort them, and this Grand Canyon of distance in the relationship, they're going to gravitate towards that second family in the community, which oftentimes is an unsavory group of peers that also feel the same way. And then they might learn additional not helpful habits like doing drugs, sexually risky behaviors, binging and purging, binge eating, that kind of thing. So, and I think that's one of the challenges working with this population, that oftentimes there's other coping strategies that they're using that are working for them. And it's interesting, the longer their career is of self-injuring, the more uses they find for it with other difficulties that they're struggling with. Or they choose certain habits to use with certain types of problems. So there's this creativity to it too, But I have found, especially with this population, they respond very well to, if they're into art therapy kinds of methods. And I think, Gil, you've seen some of the artwork of these kids. It's just striking. It's really powerful, and you can use it. It's interesting. I do what's called my soul collage, where they draw a drawing of them.
I've seen you present that. That's very. I've forgotten about it. Yeah, that's very cool.
And a profile drawing on the paper, and then you want to have on hand like lots of magazines and old newspapers. And I asked them, what do you think a soul is? And they say, I think it's where my brain is, And what is a soul? It's like my identity, it's my life experiences, it's my values, it's my cultural background. And so if we were to take the top of your head off and peer into your soul, what images, words, and phrases would emanate out of it? And then they can cut all this out and put it where the profile drawing is. And I asked this one kid who had a long career of self-injuring. She started when she was 13 and now she was 17, almost daily, a couple times a day. So I asked her, when should a therapist use this exercise with a young person like you? And she said, it's really great to do this in a first session, because it will give you an inside perspective of what's going on inside their heads. And she was dealing with this pretty severe depression and had made suicide attempts, because see, once you conquer your fear of death after you've been cutting for a while, what's to stop you from taking your life? In fact, that might be a beautiful thing to end it all, So those are the more, I think, high-risk self-injuring types of clients that we really have to monitor and not dip into that suicide ideation zone. But and then the other thing I did with her was, I call it surrealist art solutions. And we talk about surrealist art, which is one of my interest areas. And then I show them some books of Magritte and Dali just to kind of get their creative juices going. That the surrealist artists were inspired by dreams and nightmares and the random and the strange and sometimes historical events. Have you had any kind of recurring dreams or nightmares that maybe have been related to some of the difficulties you're struggling with right now? And oftentimes they'll say yes. And I'll ask, in a surrealist way, surrealist style, if you were to draw that out on this piece of paper, I would love to take a look at that. And, include the symbols, the images, the words, or whatever has appeared in your dreams or nightmares. And they have done some amazing things. The same client I'm talking about now, she did this really cool surrealist art drawing with crayons, where she had this barbed wire fencing coming down on an angle. So it kind of divided light and darkness. And on the left-hand side of the page, it was real sunshiny. And that was about hope for her. And so I asked her, what would you have to do to get to Hope Land? And she said, well, I have to figure out a way to try and get closer to one or both of my parents. I have to learn how not to get into it with one of her siblings. I have to get rid of my essentially toxic peer friends that take advantage of her all the time. On the right side, she drew this butterfly, but it was a skeleton of a butterfly. It had no color in it. One of the things that she did instead of, this was creative, cutting herself, was to draw a butterfly somewhere on her arm where she might typically cut herself. And that helped her. But the skeleton, and then she had these ribbons. Some of them were really dark, and then some of them were a little lighter. And she said the ribbons represented her depression, that sometimes she feels she's in this like deep, dark well, like paralyzed by depression. And sometimes it uplifts a little bit where she's kind of functioning a little bit better. And so I asked her, when should you use this in counseling? And she said, this is great to have a sense of where a young person wants to get to and how they'll know they got there. So you can actually use this like scaling questions,
Yeah.
And it was so helpful because it guided our therapy, and she was in the driver's seat.
Another example of the client having the solutions.
Absolutely. And another thing I wanted to say about this case in particular is the importance of honoring client preferences. Some kids, like this one, had already had some terrible family therapy experiences. And she made it really clear to me in the first session, I will not do family therapy. So I honored that. And I worked with her individually and saw the parents separately, maintaining a systemic relational framework and giving them separate experiments to do to change the nature of their relationship without having to see them together. And it worked just fine. So you don't have to get everybody who lives under the same roof, the family dog and the plants and everything. All you need is that nucleus of people that are most concerned about the situation. And then I'll expand the group if change is not happening after a session or two. That's when I'm going to ask maybe the kid, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being most concerned about you and 1 least concerned, who do you think we need to involve in our sessions in the future? And what numbers would you give them on the scale? So we're going to get those 6, 7, and 8 people in because maybe one of them is much more invested in turning things around than maybe even the parents are. Sometimes you get these window shopping parents that also have had lots of therapy with their kids and they're kind of burned out with it. But the grandmother or the aunt might be much more invested in helping work with you to help the daughter,
I love those. I love your stories. I could listen to them for hours. What brilliant. In terms of any exciting new ventures coming up, I know you was mentioning before we came on air, Matthew, that God willing, there may be a conference in London that you may be attending.
Right. I'm scheduled, I don't remember the exact date, somewhere like 23, 24 of May, or somewhere in there. I'm supposed to come to the Institute of Family Therapy and do a 2-day workshop about my work with, high-risk kids that have had lots of treatment and their families and working with the systems involved. I had asked to do some live case consultations. I don't know if we'll be able to pull that off, but I like to do that. I oftentimes, as part of my training, I've even done it virtually. It actually works out just fine.
Well, you also for the last several years, you've been doing a lot of trainings in Mexico and South America. Where else?
Turkey.
Canada. Yes, I loved Istanbul. I fell in love. It captured my heart. It's the most interesting city in terms of the history and the rich cultural diversity. And I loved it. I had a great time. And I wanted to go back there. I was supposed to go back there actually in southern Turkey. And I'm blanking out on the man's name. He's a psychologist. He runs a training center. I think it's in Istanbul. But he spent some time at the MRI Institute, and he's a really nice guy. And he wanted to have me come back and do some training around Turkey, but somewhere in the south. And I think this was around the same time that I think there were a lot of Syrian people escaping and coming across, and his team was actively involved in that. So the training kind of fell apart, but
if you do go, I will go with you so I can translate.
Well, that'd be great. I would love that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
I can run a whole solution-focused or narrative therapy session in Turkish. Thank you.
All right. Excellent.
I have many years of experience. I actually had to consult with another SF practitioner who is Turkish and say, right, when I translate it from English to Turkish, it doesn't sound right. Help.
Yeah.
So we kind of spent a few hours together. Bless her. We spent a few hours together when she was coaching me. And I was like, right, I got it now. And then it made a huge difference to my practice with the Turkish-speaking clients.
Yeah.
And I felt more confident to deliver it then.
Sure. Well, I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, you do that. You have my email.
Yeah. So I'm supposed to go to a lot of the places this year that I couldn't get to, like. And I think, Gil, you've been in touch with Hans in Peru, right?
I don't think so.
Well, there's a gentleman named Hans who actually runs a training center in Peru, and I've done some work for him, and I'm supposed to go back there also in May. And then I was supposed to go to Singapore, and I had to do a late night webinar for them, like 3 days in a row, which was killer. And then I'm supposed to go there in October, and then back to Australia. I have some contacts outside of Sydney. So, and some work in Canada. I'm doing some work for their juvenile justice system, actually, in Ontario. We have something like 600 juvenile justice workers that I'll be training, and so that's coming up. But yeah, I mean, some exciting things coming up this year.
And also, you've done on a regular basis work in Spain.
Yeah.
I want to point out your book you did with Mark Byback.
Yeah.
Excellent book, Changing Self-Destructive Habits, Pathways to Solutions with Couples and Families. I highly recommend that book. And that you did with Mark, who's in Spain.
Yeah, Mark is really a great guy. I have two brothers, Gil and Mark, and I'm hoping we can bring all of us together at some point. But Mark is a brilliant clinician, just like me. He's very integrative, well-versed in solution-focused therapy. He's done some research. That's the nice thing about Mark. He's got some research to show with certain populations how solution-focused works really well. He's done some research on child protective populations, eating disorders. So he and I usually present together, and then we wrote that book together. And we hope to reunite this year too.
Before we get done here, I have to share this little story, this little anecdote that Matthew's heard before. This is 1993, spring of 93. Michael White comes to Columbus, Ohio to do a 2-day training in narrative therapy. And there are like 200 people in the audience. So it's like the afternoon, the first day, and we take a mid-afternoon break. And so I kind of stand up to stretch my legs, and I start chatting with this gentleman behind me who's older. He's probably 20 years older than me. I found out he's from Cleveland, and he's a master's in social work person. And partway through the conversation, he says to me, "Do you know Matthew Selekman?" And I said, "Yeah, I know of his work. I don't know him personally." And by this point, the only thing I had read, Matthew, you edited a book on family therapy with adolescent substance abuse.
Yeah, with Tom Todd. Yeah.
It came out in 92, I think. 91. Yeah. So I had a copy of that book, and I had read lots of it, But I said, so Matthew had this one book. So he wasn't as famous as he is now. I may have been the only one in there that knew of Matthew, but he asked me, "Do you know Matthew Selekman?" I said, yeah, I don't know him personally. I know of his work. And then he says, he's my son. So this is Matthew's father.
Yeah.
From Cleveland, Ohio, who's a social worker and a therapist.
And let me tell you, I'll tell you a story, an offshoot of that involving my dad. So my dad is actually friendly with Michael White and David Epstein. He has trained with them extensively, and he's really good with narrative therapy. He really loves narrative therapy. And in fact, David Epstein invited my dad to come down to New Zealand and hang out. But the funny thing that happened, that it continues to happen for me, went pre-COVID. So I travel around the United States, and I'm giving workshops. And at the breaks, I have people running up to me. Say, are you related to Sam Selekman? I said, yeah, that's my dad. He's amazing. He's the best supervisor I ever had, you know. These were like social work, psychology interns that had him as a supervisor at the residential treatment center, where I was a child care worker. My dad turned me onto this field when I was a young lassie. Okay, are we being? No,
I think someone. I think someone's knocking at the door, but Ayse's gone to get it. We're fine.
So anyways, this is happening all the time, and I was telling my dad about it. He got a kick out of it. That, you know, they still remember him. I mean, like 20, 30 years, you know, after being with him. Because what was unique about the residential center was they had one-way mirrors. They were big on family therapy. They had the money to bring in people like Harry Galician, Bill O'Hanlon, Harry Aponte, you know, like all these big wigs from the field. And what was cool for me, and this was my first taste of family therapy, was they allowed the childcare staff to sit in family sessions. And I caught the family therapy fever. I ate books. I read Virginia Satir, Mnuchin's books, Jay Haley, Chloe Madonis, and you name it. And that's when I knew, yeah, I really love family therapy, and I want to go into social work and get as much training as I can.
Brilliant.
I know. We have a. Sorry, go on.
No, go on. You got a question?
No.
So Matt from Holland. I like the camera metaphor. Apart from zooming in, is your lens also about looking from a different angle that helps give some other aspects that could be helpful?
Yeah. I think the more well-versed we are in a wide range of approaches and a wide range of different fields in terms of some sort of knowledge base, sources of inspiration, we tend to see things that other people miss. And the other bonus of what I just said is that it offers us a kaleidoscopic viewing of our client situation. You know how you look in a kaleidoscope and you see multiple images, many different angles, and many options for pathways to change.
Oh. Thank you. Which is
the title of one of your books.
That's
right. One of your books. Yeah.
So we have your website, and I've also put it in the comments box. So when people visit your website, what can they expect to see?
We'll see a wide range of workshop topics, which I am doing now lately, COVID land and webinar modality. But once things get better with COVID, you know, a big part of what I like to do when I do workshops or in-house training is to do live case consultations with, you know, staff's toughest cases, and then use a wide range of team approaches so that everybody gets involved in the process, and do a lot of out-of-the-box skill-building exercises like question storming. Rather than brainstorming, we're going to come up with a wide range of questions about what has not yet been asked about this client situation. So Yeah, so they'll see a wide range of workshops. They'll see all the books that Mark and I have published. I think one of my best ones was the latest one that my pal here, Gil, had endorsed, Working with High-Risk Adolescents.
Right here.
Yeah.
Right there.
I highly recommend that one. There's a lot in there about collaborating with all the people and the client's social ecology and this whole collaborative solution-determined teams, how to do that, and some other old and new stuff. There's some full-length case examples as well, so it's almost like you're watching the whole therapy from behind a one-way mirror. And then some self-reflection about what happened in a given session and where I'm going to shift gears or what I'm going to do more of. And I think people will like that.
Have you any thoughts on doing training remotely so that everyone across the world can join and listen to your wonderful?
Yeah, I have to find the time to set that up for myself. The way it's been working over the years is people have invited me to do things, and then I put together a nice presentation remotely for that. But right now I have all these trainings I'm doing for this juvenile justice system up in Canada, and I have a book chapter I gotta crank out soon. So I'm pretty swamped right now in terms of doing my own kind of individually hosted stuff, but certainly it's in the works.
Despite being so busy doing on so many different projects, you still found the time to join us this evening. Or during the day.
And I appreciate your perseverance, Ayse.
Yes, thank you.
You've been keeping after me.
I know.
And I
have really been chasing you, Matthew.
You have been. I like it.
No
Every
one knows
week
what
I say,
happens behind the scenes. That's it. No one knows.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so
I
Ayse,
have been so busy. I'm seeing about 22 online clients a week, trying to prepare for presentations and writing and taking care of my family and trying to find time to cook up a storm.
Well, I mean, it's been amazing having you on here. We have actually run out of time.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your persistence.
And I will see you in Istanbul, hopefully.
I hope so.
If not in London.
We'll see each other in London in May.
Definitely. Joe and Gil, any last words before I close? I
just echo what Ayse says. Thank you so much. I know we've been chasing you for a while.
You? Me?
Well, Ayse has. I've just been saying, have you got Matthew yet? Have you got him? So that was my part of it, Gil, just pushing her a bit.
Yeah, I appreciate Ayse's persistence too. I mentioned it to you guys probably in June. I said, you should probably somebody you should get is Matthew Selekman. Yeah. And then I didn't hear anything for a good while. I thought, well, maybe you'd given up or that just wasn't going to happen. So I'm really glad it all came together.
I'm so glad it's happened. I feel energized. I want to look at, because Gil, we do often meet Gil once a month, and he shares knowledge and videos, which we always appreciate. And I know Gil has opened our minds to other avenues, and talking to you has just made it even more exciting. So thank you so much for that.
And also, again, just to remind Matthew and everybody else that these interviews you guys do, you put up on you have a YouTube channel, and all the interviews you've been doing are available there.
Oh, look at Gil advertising on YouTube. I love you, Gil. Our godfather.
I think it's a great resource. You guys have done a real service to the field, doing these interviews and creating this YouTube channel. It's a way of exposing people from around the world to the best thinkers in the field.
Yeah, and I can say, Matthew and Gil, we've had quite a few service users, clients watching tonight, and some of what you've said do resonate with them. So I'm glad that they were watching. And That's the beauty of the chats. It will support and help others without us having to do anything, and it's very empowering for them.
So, Joe, have you given up then asking people their 5 favorite questions?
Yeah, that died a death.
That died a death, Gil.
Has that
I think
run out?
I think it was just, it kind of, I just forgot to ask, and it was more interesting actually just having conversations, and especially like today. And it's been a buzz. It's been brilliant. And Matthew's got such a wonderful way. There's that smile and that voice, and you can't help but get sucked in. So thank you.
You could be saying nonsense.
Yeah, you could be reciting the alphabet. It wouldn't have made.
And we're like, yes.
You see, you don't realize that I put you in a trance.
I'm in that trance.
There were subliminal messages in your mind that you weren't even aware of.
See, I'm giving there's me packing my suitcase, getting everything ready because I'm sitting in this trance. But thank you so much. Can I just ask Matthew and Gil, just stay there for a couple of minutes. Don't press anything, just so we can say bye to you personally.
Okay.
And everybody else, we will see you next week for an FBS chat with Raya Gul and her colleagues, where we discuss one of their books. So we will see you next week. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.